it is time to start looking at our society and how we use our natural capital or natural resources. And we have to look at it in terms of use and also in terms of the end product or waste. And so we need to spend a little bit of time looking at this waste stream and how we use and eventually dispose of our natural resources that we use throughout our society. So we're going to take a close look at how our society works and its impact on the environment and an impact on the natural systems in which we depend upon. So to get a general idea of how this all works, we need to look at this concept of inputs and outputs. So when we look at inputs and outputs in any system, we're talking about what you put into the system versus what you take out of the system. So if we want to just get a general idea, I'll draw it, I think would probably be the best way to do this. And we look at our inputs. Okay, and these are the things that we put into the system. And I think you can come up with what those things would be. I think it's pretty simple. It's one of two things. It's either a raw material, and in our case, some sort of natural resource is what we're talking about here. All right? And then also, there's one other input that you have to put into the system, and that is energy. So you have those two things going in, and then you end up creating a product and using it and using it and using it. Okay, maybe recycling it, all right, or whatever. This is the use portion of it. So you go inputs to use, and then you end up with an output. Now the question is, what is that output? Well, it can come in two different forms also, if you look at it in general terms. One could be what we like to call waste. All right, now, I'm taking that term very loosely right now. It's any material that can be either recycled or disposed of, but we'll call it waste because basically it's unwanted byproduct. All right, we like to call that waste. And then also don't forget, because of the laws of thermodynamics, the second law of entropy says that as we go through the system, we go from one energy transformation to another, we end up with waste energy. Okay, energy that's no longer useful for us. All right, this is the whole idea of entropy. And so you're going to end up with that as an output. So you have inputs and you have outputs. Now, those outputs, the material part is what we call waste. And I like to define waste, if I would give it a definition, I like to call it an unwanted byproduct. It is something that's no longer wanted. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's an unwanted byproduct. And if that unwanted byproduct is harmful, we give it a different name. Now, this could be harmful to the health of humans, or it could be harmful to the health of any type of wildlife, and we call that pollution. So, waste that's generated oftentimes comes in the form of some type of material. It could be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. Solid would be what we like to call trash or something like that. A liquid would be something like maybe a toxic substance like fracking fluid that's no longer useful, or it could be sewage. Okay, and then it could also become in the form of air pollution or as air, and that is things like exhaust from your car or the emissions coming from a smokestack from an electric power plant or something like that. Now, with that in mind, okay, when we talk about these things, we ended up putting out more and more outputs, all right, in our society as the Industrial Revolution went, and then the United States started to industrialize, and then we started noticing problems occurring anytime we'd have waste that went into the air and when it went into the water. And we started noticing that there were problems. So what did we do? We created a law that prevents waste from going in the air or reduces it. And that is the Clean Air Act. Then we created laws to stop the pollution going in water. And you'll never guess what that's called. The Clean Water Act. Both of these laws were in the early 1970s. So now we can't or we have to reduce the amount of waste going into the air. We have to reduce the amount of waste going into the water. So what's left? Well, we've taken a problem that used to be in our air and water, and now it has become a land problem. So now many laws are starting or have started to come into effect that actually help protect the land. All right, so we took waste and we just generate it. We continue to generate it, but we move it from one location to another. Okay, whoops. All right, let's move on here. What's the root cause of this waste problem? And I'm going to throw out a whole bunch of terms here, and you can come up with your decision on what you truly believe is our problem here. We have a problem in that we take our waste and we don't follow like natural cycles where in nature any waste is reused. It's never considered waste. In our society, we don't follow those rules and we generate stuff we don't want anymore. All right, so why? Why do we become this throwaway society? Why are we in the situation we are today? Well, one is because of overpopulation. The more people we have, the more resources we will need to use, and every time we create a product, we have some sort of byproduct or waste. In America, I think it's obvious that we overconsume. We consume more than we really have to. Also, we have to look at the packaging that we create. Packaging, its total life is just a few seconds. So it becomes this material that we create, this waste that we create, just because we want to be able to have something packaged and transported that way. Wastefulness, our whole concept of wastefulness has just changed dramatically, where we think as we become more affluent, we become more of a disposable society. Non-biodegradability, we create products that don't degrade in nature. In fact, you're going to learn some of the ways that we prevent biodegradability to occur. Convenience. We are a world of convenience. We want convenience. Well, that convenience comes with a cost, and that cost happens to be this generation of huge amounts of waste. And all of that packed up on top of a limited amount of resources creates this dilemma that we're in. Now, there's another famous term that's used by the story of stuff called planned obsolescence, and I think that's our newest term. Okay, when we take all these terms, these are the root causes, but if we also add one more, I'll put it at the top here, called planned obsolescence. I have to make sure I spell it correctly. I'm making sure, I hope I'm right. Obsolescence, meaning that we design products that are planned to become obsolete. And you know this with technology more than anything. And it's not just technology. Now it's everything from, simplest things like toaster ovens to things like even like napkins, diapers, these things that are supposed to be disposed of. Okay, and we create it because we all believe, and maybe this should also be included in one of the roots of our waste problem. We all believed, and this is something you do not have to write down, just so you know. We all believe in something called, try it here, the miracle of trash. We're all believers in that. And what I mean by that is that we all believe that when we throw something away, it actually goes away. Well, I'm telling you right now, there is no such place as away. The miracle of trash occurs when you put trash into that big container, your trash can, and then you wheel that thing out onto the street, and then you go to bed at night. And just like the Tooth Fairy, you wake up in the morning, and guess what happened, in this case, to your trash? The miracle occurred. It disappeared. Well, it doesn't disappear. It goes someplace, and we have to be aware of that. And the miracle of trash does not exist. Okay, it's one of those things, just like Santa Claus, that just does not exist unless we believe. And I think we spend too much time trying to believe in the miracle of trash. all the causes, the root causes of our problem, all relate mostly to a type of trash called municipal solid waste. Whoops, there's an I in there. Municipal solid waste. And this waste is all the waste that comes from residents, meaning households, and commercial properties, meaning like small businesses, stores, and stuff like that. All right. Of all the waste in this country, municipal solid waste only makes up about 2% of all the waste. It's a very small amount when you look at the total amount of waste created. The difference is most of the industrial waste, all right, comes or is taken care of within the industry itself. So it's nothing that we can do anything about, and industry is pretty good at taking care of that because it's a cost analysis that they do, and they find out that it does save them money if they take care of their waste. Things like agricultural waste, which can be recycled, industrial waste by reducing the amount of pollution they emit, therefore reducing their costs, things like that. All right. On average, we make per person about, in the United States, about 4.5 pounds of trash per day. Now, how does that stack up against other countries? Well, if you look at a country like Japan, where in Japan they make about 2.4 pounds of trash per day. All right, and that's in Japan. Just to give you some comparison, we definitely make a lot of trash in this country. In fact, the average of all the industrialized countries or the developed world, the average falls somewhere between 1.8 and our 4.5. That's the industrial or the developed. In the developing world, it's a little bit different. In the developing world, averages 1.2 pounds of trash per person per day. Okay, what happens to this trash? Well, in the case of our municipal solid waste, it can either be disposed of, it can be recycled, or it can be incinerated. So we're going to be looking at those three things. But for now, just remember that of all the municipal solid waste, all right, about 60% of it comes from people, residents like you and I. The other 40% comes from the commercial properties and stuff. So keep that in mind when we're talking about municipal solid waste here. So it makes about 2% of all the waste in the United States. It's about 4.5 pounds per person per day, and we're talking solid waste. So we're talking what we like to call trash. Okay? Hopefully you can absorb that. Hopefully not too difficult. All right, and let's move on. Of all the waste generated, here are the categories and the amount. And this is all the waste generated in the United States. And you will see that of all the waste generated, the number one component of our trash, as you can see here, is paper and paperboard. The number one component of our trash is paper and cardboard. The number two is kind of a tie between yard waste and food scraps, followed very closely by plastics, and then metal, rubber, leather, textiles, okay, and all the others over there. Okay, well, here's the key. If you look at that waste in that chart, I think you'll find something very interesting. When you look at that, look at all the parts that are organic, meaning things like paper, food scraps, yard trimmings, and wood, all of which can be composted. And then you can look at the other categories: glass, metals, plastics, all right, all can be easily recycled. So when you look at the entire amount of our trash in what it's made of, you're looking at somewhere around 75 to 80% of it is very easily recycled. Yet, we only recycle about 33% of it. Okay, so the total amount of trash that we create is 250 million tons, and of that, okay, about 80% of it is completely recyclable. but only about a third actually gets recycled. And a small amount is incinerated, around 15%, and then the rest is disposed of. All right. Of the breakdown by source of where this trash comes from, number one is containers and packaging. Okay, just to give you some idea. So of all this waste, most of it comes from containers and packaging. Now we have a problem of how to dispose of or take care of this waste. The most common techniques in the past were open dumps. All right, these are unregulated disposal places. In the United States, they're outlawed, but that's not true in other countries, like tropical countries like this, where that's the number one way of getting rid of their waste. They're just dumped. All right, these are called open dumps, very unregulated. All right, the environmental impact of these places is just staggering. But that doesn't leave us completely benign to this problem. This picture right here is outside of Souderton. There was an open dump down an old dirt road in Telford area, where it just became a dump site. An easy way to dispose of items that would cost a family some money to get rid of. Now they do it for nothing in these open dumps. And these open dumps are coming back to haunt us in many ways. A lot of times the open dumps are put near bodies of water. The trash then gets into our rivers and streams, flows out into the ocean. And so the oceans have not only become a huge dumping ground, but it's actually starting to impact the wildlife in large numbers. And a very unusual feature on our planet is something you don't hear much about, and that's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's an area in our ocean that is for miles and miles and miles, unfortunately not covered, but has huge amounts and globs like this of trash floating around. And it's found off the coast of Hawaii. It's in the Pacific Ocean. And you can see it's caught up in a spiral pattern of our ocean currents called the North Pacific Gyre. And what that does is it takes all the trash from the Pacific Ocean and almost like a whirlpool concentrates it into a small area off of Hawaii, and all of that trash starts drifting together. And it's sad because the plastics, the one type of material that does not break down, remains in the ocean for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And it unfortunately remains there and gets either taken in by wildlife or gets washed up on the beach somewhere. The impact of this is horrible. This is trash from our land, all right, getting washed up on beaches, and it has a major impact on wildlife. This is a very telling picture because this particular bird, if you look inside what remains of its stomach, you will find many small pieces of plastic. Animals cannot distinguish between plastics and food, especially in the area like the garbage patch where there's so much plastic they consume it. And you can see lots of bottle caps, even what looks like a lighter in there in the stomach. And what happens is the bird then tries to digest that. It doesn't digest. Plastic bag pieces block the intestines, and the bird basically starves to death because nothing can be digested. So, what should we do about it? Well, in 1990, we came up with something called the Pollution Prevention Act. The EPA came up with a hierarchy of what they think should be done with our waste. And I put the hierarchy on this triangular pyramid where we take the most preferred technique of handling our waste at the top, and that is to reduce it. This is the most preferred. Then below that, if we can't reduce it, we recycle it. If you can't recycle it, we treat it, which usually means incineration, but there are other techniques we can discuss. And then at the very, very least, it's disposal. Now the reason why I put it in the triangular shape, you might be able to guess. Where we start reduce at the top, recycle in the middle, or in the middle with treatment, and then disposal at the bottom. The reason why it's put in this particular pyramid, is because although the most preferred is at the top, it's the one that's done the least. Disposal is our number one way of handling our waste. So if you looked at it in more detail, I think this one even gives you better detail. The best option is prevention at the top, and then waste minimization, reducing it as much as possible, and then reusing it and recycling it are kind of together in my first pyramid, because reusing is a kind of recycling, but reusing is actually better than recycling. And then if you can't do that, you do what they call incineration or energy recovery, which we'll get into great detail. And then finally, the worst option at the bottom would be disposal. Unfortunately, disposal has become our number one technique because it's the cheapest of all. So we have a lot to discuss in this unit. We need a plan. We need to figure out what we're doing with this waste, how to handle it, all right, and figure out a way that we can best suit our needs while balancing the needs of nature and without sacrificing the ability of future generations to meet their needs.